those are the key ideas that I wanted to bring here. Let's go with this part of already building our strategies and thinking about what our strategies should be based on. Okay, so the thing is that, of course, we need to do a strategic framing. For a sounded engagement strategy, we need to put in motion different frameworks and ideas that will help us and that will help people in the institution understand inequalities and consider inequalities as the result or the outcome of institutional arrangements, institutional policies, institutional procedures, practices, informal norms, and all those things. We need to connect all that in our message to present to the people. For example, using what I was saying yesterday, this Joan Acker's notion of gendered organization is part of our strategic framing to explain how academic work environments are imbued with hierarchies and inequalities that, of course, are disproportionately affecting women. So we need to explain what, why, and how. So what is exactly what we need to bear in mind about this strategic framing? Okay, so the first idea would be that strategic framing is about the ability of a collective action to resonate or appeal to a targeted audience. So here we need to go to our map of actors. We select a specific group within the map of actors, maybe because of some affinity, because they are in a position of power, maybe because they are the resistant group, or better, if we target them because they are potential allies, or maybe just because it's a group of motivated people and active people, but they just lack the knowledge. Whatever, we select the target group, and then we think, what can be appealing for that specific group? So that is what the first question. Sorry, let me put the sound off my mobile phone. First question. So second, strategic framing is about the conjunction of the goals of change agents and the ideational elements in the cultural milieu or cultural context that is the target of the desired change. Okay, so we need to put those two in common, in conversation. And then the crucial question for societal change then is, what framing will rouse the interests of the involved stakeholders? What is going to engage them? What are they interested in? What concepts and ideas can we bring into our framework and give the perspective to that? Okay, if we talk specifically about framing for gender equality, strategic framing for gender equality is about discussing how gender equality goals are beneficial or crucial for the entire organization, connected with the other priorities of the organization. And Yvonne Galligan was in fact mentioning this in the summer school of the Gender Equality Academy in Dublin. And she was mentioning the importance and the how it works for them, this thing of connecting gender equality to the general values of the institution. Then framing needs to consider the different goals connected to gender equality, covering the different areas. This is covering if we're talking about work-life balance, or if we're talking about gender in research, gender in teaching, whatever. And identify suitable framing strategies for each one of them and their respective stakeholders. This is why yesterday we were doing the map of actors for each specific area of action. So we can then select specific target groups and do a specific framing strategy for that group in that specific area, okay? And then the strategic framing exercise should also consider whether there are broader windows of opportunity for change connected with other crucial organizational challenges and how to use them. And here again, Marvelous Cantola, contradictions are can be windows of opportunity here. So always take that into account. So in the end, it's the whole idea, the core of it is that what we need to do is creating meaning for gender equality in the institution. and that implies framing, or the other way around. Framing is about creating meaning about gender equality, and also about using it. So let's see how we're going to do that. The key aspect here is that the more you use them, the more you activate a frame. So whenever we have activated frames by at some point, it should become common sense in the institution. This is one example, is what happened with this approach that we moved from fixing women to fixing institution or fixing science. We are still on the way, still a lot to be done, but this is a frame, very clear frame, with lots of connected ideas to help to explain that. And we're constantly using it. So we are moving, and we're getting to the transformation of the context, constantly speaking and explaining about that. So this is, for example, one frame that we can use. So how do we do that? And here we go, Oscar, to the practical side of it. Okay, how can we put all this in motion? First, we need to talk about framing principles. Okay, how can we do that? First, we need to speak to people's best self. This is, we need to appeal to their values, to their ideas, all those things that underpin aspects of related to human rights and equality, to the different values, social justice, and all the different values that people feel attached to, and that call to our best self to be a good person. Then we need to create a common ground. And this is also very important, Oscar. You were mentioning yesterday the group with men. And this is really a tip for when you need to address specific groups of men. You need to create a common ground. And Jen de I don't know how to pronounce them. I'm sure you know this academic, feminist academic, Jean de Vries, I think it's de Vries. She was talking about this in a seminar just last week, I think it was. And she was saying how we need to invite men into the conversation and into the issue. And it was this thing of creating a common ground and see how we can have issues that will affect both men and women, and use that as a calling question. In the end, the thing is that the sense of being part of a same group is what will help people to empathize with the others, and what will motivate them to support each other. Okay, so that's a key idea. Then we need to talk about change, because it's easy to imagine that showing people that we have a problem, it will be enough to motivate our response. But we know that it is not like that. We're constantly talking about our problems and what happens to us because we are women within this patriarchal academic environment, and people is not motivated. So we need to talk about it. People need to see that there is a problem for all of us, and we need to create common ground also on that. And they need to see that they have a role. So it's normally people see, okay, we have 20% of female full professor, but what can I do about that? What does it mean in the practice? What does it mean for you? Or I mean, maybe you are there because you just don't want to, because you prefer to be with your family. No? We need to talk about this. What does it mean? How can we change that? Constantly talk about that, making sense of it, and also locate change into the local level. And then we need to make it real. We often believe that just showing the data, no, saying this 20% of female full professor will just change our audience mind. But people normally, they don't think on percentages and data and so on. They think or they move based on beliefs and based on feelings and based on values. So we cannot rely on the fact alone. We need to tell a story and use powerful images. This is also one of the things of using images, because it takes you to a different place. And it opens different parts of the brain and the body. So we need to try to think how to frame our ideas as a story, okay? So that would be also another tip of how to do that. And then we need to avoid reinforcing unhelpful frames. It's normally easy to get dragged into answering and rebutting the ideas of all those opponents, no? As I think it was Clarissa was mentioning before, no? To work with those resistant groups. But in the end, doing so can reinforce sometimes the very beliefs that you're trying to counteract. So we need to take care about that. And anyway, we need to know, of course, what can be the unhelpful frames around the issue. For example, just to give you an example too, one tricky one is when we talk about meritocracy and excellence. It can totally go the other way around and reinforce those people when we say that we need to have quotas. If we don't have a clear frame with a common ground, if we don't explain why we need that, if we don't put that into a story with examples, if we don't get some thread that people can feel that they can maybe get connected to the idea through that, maybe then what we will do is just getting people more reinforced and attached to the argument of no, that is totally contrary to the meritocracy system that is all around the world, and it's what we need to do because we need to be valued for our efforts, and all this discourse on meritocracy and so on. So we really need to take care about how we are explaining and framing our ideas, all the different related concepts and so on, to avoid reinforcing these unhelpful frames, okay? One of the lessons learned here from different structural change projects is that one aspect to overcome this gender fatigue that you heard about, no? This condition that in some organizations people feel already like oversaturated or a little bit tired about, gender again. I'm sure that you all have heard this thing, here you come again with the gender issues. So one aspect for overcoming this gender fatigue is to change the notion of how gender equality is communicated within the institution. So it's good that you have different framings here and different concepts and different ways of telling one story, okay? Then from the how we frame, we move to what we frame. So we need we need to express three basic things, or three framing tasks here. First, the problem. We need to get an agreement that there is a problem and what it is. So problems is not something that just is, we say we have this problem and then people will get motivated. And of course, if we don't name the problem, it won't be visible, it will never be resisted, it will never be challenged. So we need to name the problem and we need to frame it. And according to Mike Berlou, you have the reference of the webinar of Mike Berlou about framing, which is really nice. I recommend that you go into the YouTube channel and look for that one. What he says is that framing will help us transforming all these fragments, all these different or unconnected ideas or incidental information into a structure and a meaningful problem. So we need to use the different concepts to frame the properly frame the problem that we want to talk about. Then we need to talk about the solution and get an agreement that there is a solution and what it is. So we need to tell people what they can do about this, okay? And then, of course, we were talking about the importance of motivation yesterday. We need to inspire, support, or action with our frame, with our story, with what we are telling the people. We need to show to the target groups, to our audience, why they should care and how they can act. So those would be like the main tips. But also some caveats here. We need also to take care of few aspects. First, of course, contextuality. So what is meaningful in one place is not necessarily the same elsewhere. Then we need to take care of the path dependency. Framing initially sets the terms for its further development possibilities, so it is difficult to change points of view and arguments later on. Choose very carefully what are the concepts, the ideas, the strategic framing that you would want to go for, okay? And then rhetorical entrapment it will always be necessary to be alert, not to be swept away by the mainstream. All framings may be used against you. And last, of course, alliances. All framing structures future alliances. So we need to take care of that thing that I was mentioning. What is going to resonate? What is going to be appealing for a specific target group? Maybe that movable middle that will, at some point, maybe finally be an ally. No? We need also to identify possible antagonists, and our framing will probably also trigger some groups of antagonists and people, which of course will say you are not right, but we know about that. So, okay, before we move into the exercise that I want to propose to you, I just brought a couple of quotes that I like a lot, and I think that can help us thinking a little bit about this framing task and how to do that. So the first one is by Sarah Ahmed. You might know the book, Living a Feminist Life, which is nice. So the quote is that to be appointed as a diversity practitioner is to be put into an oblique relation to the institution. You're appointed by an institution to transform the institution. To this extent, an appointment can signify that an institution is willing to be transformed. However, being appointed to transform an institution does not necessarily mean the institution is willing to be transformed. Seems quite tricky, but I think it's quite clear. And I think that the underlying idea here is that we need to try to not to be too naive and choose and pick up our words, our frames, and our fights as well. As you were mentioning before, we need to pick up our fights and our words, taking this into account and not being naive. And the second one is from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And she says that gender is not an easy conversation to have. It makes people uncomfortable, sometimes even irritable. Both men and women are resistant to talk about gender or are quick to dismiss the problems of gender because thinking of changing the status quo is always uncomfortable. So this is something that we need to take into account when we frame the problem, how we frame it, how we talk about gender. We always need to take into account the profile, the needs, the knowledge, the level of knowledge and the level of resistances of our target audiences. So last part, this is basically main recommendations. I will share some recommendations that are just gathered from different institutions and different structural change projects. And then we can maybe engage in a discussion to add some more to the list. So I can add all of them into the PPT, the PPT that you will receive, okay? So what would be the main recommendations for engaging change agents as our strategies? As we were saying, focus on your allies. You need to work with your allies first, and you build from there, instead of focusing on all those resistant people. Then we need to connect gender equality to institutional strategies. This is what Yvonne Galligan said that they were doing in Dublin, connecting the institutional values, connecting gender equality to the institutional values, and it was working for them. It was an argument, it was working for them. Frame gender equality actions to address emergent priorities and widely recognized challenges of the organization. Then support internal initiatives this is also a way of making allies and getting people on board, and probably even discovering new change agents in unexpected places that you hadn't thought about before, and that maybe they weren't even in your map factors. Okay, so support other initiatives and use the activities and resources of the action plan, of the gender equality plan, to support initiatives of other people that can have a gender equality perspective and that can contribute to your gender equality goals. Establishing mutually beneficial relations with relevant stakeholders. Then use active and participatory methods. We have talked about that, promote involvement with bottom-up groups and experiences, and this will definitely trigger motivation to be involved throughout the rest of the process, and to be involved in the implementation of activities and so on. And of course, it motivates the self-reflection that we need to actually have a cultural change. And then this thing of size in the moment, and Fiona McKay says, always have a proposal in your pocket, always. Even a small one, but always have a proposal and an idea in your pocket. And then this concept of the tempered radicalism, you have the link at the end of the presentation with this article by Meyerson and Scully about the tempered radicalism. Really interesting how these tempered radicals, these figures of, I am a feminist, I really want to go to the roots of the problems in our institution. I really want to transform the whole power relations, which has been radical. But then, of course, I cannot say that, and I cannot frame always my words in that radical frame. And we as feminists, we are always asked to temper ourselves, to say things nicely. And if you can say that with a smile, people are even happier. So we need to be tempered at the same time as we want to be radicals. It's kind of a schizophrenic at some points. But in the end, they explain in this article how these tempered radicals are central figures in this battle for change. Because, at some point, of course, we have to take care of them, because if they get burned out, which is quite easy, or at some point they become co-opted, then they can contribute fully to the process of change from the inside. So they are this idea of the insiders within, they're kind of inside change agents from that point of view, but at the same time having these radical views and all this feminist background, activism and knowledge kind of makes them an outsiders as well. So they have like these 2 points of view. So they're definitely key change agents. So how can we use this tempered radicalism for our goals? And of course, focus on the small wins strategies. And then manage your efforts and your energy. And this has to do with, one of you was saying, my aha was suddenly acknowledging myself as a change agent. First thing we need to do is we need to care about our own activism, and then of course care about the activism of the rest of the people. It's quite tiring and exhausting to be this tempered radical, to be the one pushing for change, to be the one thinking about the framings and the audiences and changing then the arguments because this one is not working, and I need a solid and sounded and consistent frame, and pushing for it all the time. It's an exhausting work. You work for gender equality at your institutions. So we really need to pick up our fights. We really need to manage our efforts, and we really need to manage our energy, because what we need to think when we talk about change agents, again, we need to think about people, not structures. We need to think about people and not only processes. We normally think in all projects, we talk about the sustainability of the gender equality plan, the sustainability of the process, the sustainability of the action. But what about the sustainability of the change agents and the sustainability of the activism that they are bringing and the sustainability of their own motivation? So this is the last one in the list, but for me is really one of the most important. And when change agents feel that you care for that, and you take their own activism into account, and that you care for what they decide to bring, then they will be motivated and permanently engaged with you and with the process. So I just wanted to end and do this wrap up with this last quote from Jane Barry and Jelena Diordovich. They say that sustainability is about being able to do the work you love and still feeling full and happy in every part of your life, feeling safe, recognized, respected, and valued. So take care about your big or small bunch of change agents. Take care of yourself and of your own activism. And I think that's the best strategy to really engage the change agents. I would just leave it here. The presentation, we will engage into the final discussion now. And in the end, this is mainstreaming gender into every aspect of life, which is what we want to achieve with the gender equality plan in the institution as well. Not losing sight of our central motivation and of our main goal, which is ending gender power relations. So yeah, it's always the debate now with mainstreaming, no? If we just mainstream and we just support all the different initiatives and we get all these different aspects on board, are we going to lose sight of this central goal of ending gender power relations?